Hi guys, you know the UK shouldn't have a good relationship with the EU, because discussing such a thing is very upsetting for people like Nick Ferrari. So the LBC host was invited onto the Laura Kuenssberg show, where he put out a number of claims, which of course went unchallenged by the BBC journalist. He pointed to language used by the Conservatives and their friends in the media as toxic, which once again points to moving on from Brexit, and it seems not trying to improve the relationship with Europe. Oh my goodness.
What did you make of it?
Laura, I felt as if I wanted to bang my head against the table here. What don't they, both sides, get? I think most of your viewers would agree. Brexit unleashed a toxicity in this country, and we both work in this.
Right in the middle of it, yeah.
And it's never been. So when you hear language like surrender, surrender of sovereignty, sell out, losing our hard-won freedoms, do they, both parties, do they all want to go back to how we were all at each other's throats? It was a terrible time for this country. It really...
Okay, we're not talking about the UK rejoining the European Union. We're not even talking about the UK rejoining the single market. We're talking about three things in particular. A youth mobility scheme, which is limited to 18 to 30 or 18 to 35-year-olds for a limited amount of time. Not immigration, not freedom of movement. We're talking about dynamic alignment, which would reduce the barriers to trade. And we're talking about perhaps a military pact between the UK and the EU, where the UK would sell military hardware to the European Union or European Union members. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about rejoining the European Union here. So this isn't really a Brexit discussion. And isn't it funny that when there was all this discussion about leaving the European Union, people like Nick Ferrari said, look, we need to leave. It doesn't matter what the consequences are. And now, when we're talking about even just having a better relationship between the EU and the UK, he's like, no, let's stop talking about this. Let's not have these benefits. Let's not reduce the friction at the border. Let's not allow young people to come in. And of course, remember young people from Britain to access universities and jobs abroad. No, let's not have those things, because I am upset with language being used by people on my side.
Really was, and I don't see how this language helps. To you asked a series of very fair questions about the sort of money that they might be prepared to get back into certain facets or certain aspects.
The money is to access services, to access schemes. Like Horizon, the UK, if it wanted to be part of Horizon, it had to pay into it. And then it would be able to access the scientists and the research connected to that. Does Nick Ferrari understand the concept of joining a club or going to a gym or something like that, where you have to pay to use the services, or you have to pay to be part of that club?
Was there an answer? No, there wasn't. How is a youth movement scheme not the same as freedom of movement? I mean, they've got...
Where is Laura Kuenssberg? She's sitting next to him and she just Nick Ferrari obviously knows the difference between a youth mobility scheme and immigration or freedom of movement. But Laura Kuenssberg doesn't call him out here. Once again, complete and utter failure from the media. You're supposed to say, no, Nick, wait a moment. Let me explain the difference, because obviously you don't know the difference. Would you like to know the difference?
Got to be the same. Where is there a cap? Is there a cap on numbers? Again, no answer.
What would be the point in a cap? Like, we're talking about people coming over to study in universities. We're talking about people coming over to work for a limited period of time. I think the cap is within the age group, and the cap is on the amount of time they can stay. We're not talking about millions of people coming over. Why is it necessary to have a cap on numbers?
And as you asked about food prices, it all seems a little bit up in the air, so they've got to be so careful. And don't be surprised that your viewers, when they open their Sunday papers, you've already got the battle lines being drawn. The Sun on Sunday, the Sunday Mail on Sunday, the Sunday Express, the Sunday Telegraph, and then you've got the Observer. And I have to say, language like that they've just employed is only going to get worse, and I don't want that for Britain again.
So what we need to do is that we need to stop both sides trying to undo the damage of Brexit because it upsets people like Nick Ferrari. Because Nick Ferrari doesn't want to talk about Brexit anymore. He's a Brexiteer. He thinks Brexit has been a success, but he doesn't want to talk about it anymore for some reason. A huge win, but let's not repeat any language related to it. Now, he was right when he said it was toxic. But it was damaging to Britain. Economically as well as politically. Economically as well as socially. So wouldn't it make sense to try and undo some of that damage? But we're not talking about the UK rejoining the European Union. So what Nick Ferrari should be doing is calling out the media and the journalists on his side and say, this is not a betrayal. This is not surrender. To think it is absurd. But he won't do that. Instead, he wants people to bury their head in the sand and just move on. Well, because he doesn't run a small business that's trying to export into the single market, he's not a farmer, he's not somebody who's deeply impacted by Brexit. So he doesn't care. And he doesn't want anyone else to care either.